And we are back with another episode of the Kyle and Sloan Show. I am very excited today to have a guest on the show. It is Keaton Weiss of the Due Dissidents podcast. Keaton, huge fan of your show, and I was very honored to be a guest a week and a half ago now. So, want to really get you on this show. And of course, the way the news has been breaking, I really couldn't think of a topic that I will want to talk to you more about than what we have scheduled for today. So, Keaton, how's it going?
Going okay, man. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back. Yeah, you invited me on last week. I said, why don't we wait till there's another ICE murder? I feel like, I'll have more to say if we just wait, just give it a few days, and turns out that happened.
It's almost like you could count on putting a heavily militarized,
Yeah.
very untrained, low IQ police force in the middle of American city that where tensions are already high, and you're going to have disaster as a result. That was somehow predictable. So we'll talk about the second ICE killing. U.S. gears up for war with Iran, and if we have time, Viktor Orban and Zelensky are sparring again, and it's worth getting into. So let's just start off. This happened over the weekend. A second man in Minneapolis was shot and killed by ICE. And Chris, we could just roll the footage so people could see. There's, of course, a lot going on in this scene, King, but the real confrontation happens with a man in a brown jacket. He appears to try to get in between police officer or the ICE, not police officers, the ICE agents, and a couple of women they're beating on. They spray them all with mace, and then they try to separate this guy and attack him. During the kind of confrontation between the ICE officers and this man, they do take a gun out of his, I'm guessing it's holstered, it's in his waistband. And after that, the ICE officers open fire on him. So, Keen, I'm just kind of interested in your overall take on the actual shooting.
Well, I'm hesitant to parse this one from the Renee Good shooting since they were both obviously so outrageous and clearly unjustified. But this one is even more obviously murder than that one. With the Renee Good shooting, and like I said, I feel weird even parsing it because that was, an outrageous incident as well. There was no car running at anybody here. There was no impetus for the kind of panic here that you could say, well, the car was coming right at him, so he panicked and reached for his gun. This was an example, as we just saw, and as you just described. These goons pushed this woman who was filming them into the snow. And so, in response, Alex Preddy goes to help her up, and they start beating on him. And you can't even say he escalated in no video. And I've watched this from multiple angles dozens of times. We covered it yesterday on our show. In no angle does he even fight back against the ICE officers who are beating on him, much less reach for his weapon. He never showed any force towards them whatsoever. So it's just obvious, blatant murder. And you could see in the sequence of events there, the guy in the gray sweatshirt takes the gun from the pocket or the holster, wherever it was, and makes his way out of the dog pile, and then the shots are fired. And there's another video that's out there where you could see, the ICE officers after the shooting takes place, looking around, saying, "Where's the gun? Where's the gun?" It seems somebody screamed, "Gun, gun." The guy grabs the gun, leaves the dog pile with the gun. The shots are fired. Afterwards, they're saying, "Where's the gun? Where's the gun?" Because they realize they just shot someone who had posed no threat to their lives whatsoever. So it's as blatant as can be.
Absolutely, yeah. As you say, with the Renee Good shooting, that one, as much as I don't think it's justified, that I don't think we as Americans should accept our police being able to kill us like that. It is a video that many of us have seen time and time again over the past couple of decades, where anybody who's in a car and that car is moving in the remote direction of a police officer, that police officer could say, "I fear for my life," and shoot the driver of that car. It's happened. I've seen it several times. This one, is something I've also seen play out before, but it is a clear case of the police being wrong, right? Where it's a lack of training, a lack of communication. They're yelling, they're beating on this guy, and one officer says, "I have his gun." Another officer hears gun, starts yelling, "Show me your hands." The guy doesn't show them his hands, probably because his ears are ringing from beating in the head. I don't know. It was either like a nightstick or a meg light they were hitting him in the head with. His hands are over his eyes because he was maced in the face. Like, his reaction is obvious, but because of the miscommunication, the lack of training, the cop kills him. And I guess that is the most generous interpretation we could give to the police officers here, is that was a lack of undertraining, a lack of communication, and not just a straight up willful execution by shooting a man in the back of the head, which is what we see happen here. So I know, Keaton, you have gotten into this idea that there is like performative violence carried out by the US government in order to stoke tensions. Do you think that's what occurred here, or it's more just like a mistake by the police,
Well, I mean, I think,
ICE officers?
yeah, I mean, I think on an individual level, these guys are just Keystone Cop backbencher losers. Who, yeah, absolutely just, act like belligerent lunatics. I mean, if we back it up to the beginning of the incident, there's absolutely no reason why they should be even getting in the face of someone who's filming them. People have a right to film them with their phones. They have a right to do that. So even before anything turns violent, why are you even going up to a woman who's on the side of the road with a camera and getting in her face, much less shoving her to the ground, which they did? You have a right to do that. And we've seen countless videos on X and elsewhere of ICE officers approaching people in their car saying, "Stop filming us and stop following us, or else we're going to break the window open and drag you out of the car." I mean, they just act like out of control thugs. That's against the law. That's illegal. People have a right to film officers with their phone. So, on the individual level, these people are just acting like out of control thugs and idiots. But yeah, if you zoom out, of course, this is a strategy of tension. The goal here is a performative display of force in order to sow distrust, in order to consolidate power, and in order to justify the construction of a national police force. That's clearly what this is. When you look at the tripling of the ICE budget, what you think they did that so they can roust, 20,000 immigrants, and then what are they going to do with those jails that they build after they get the immigrants out? Are they going to convert that into public housing? No, they're going to keep them open. Those are for the people. This is about building a police state. ICE is not this long-standing American institution. ICE itself is a creation of the DHS, which was a creation of the post 9/11 paranoia that led people to believe that current border enforcement wasn't good enough, because what if Al Qaeda crosses the border and they start establishing cells in America? Well, the immigrant just became the replacement for the Islamic terrorist, right? Which is what justified the whole creation of the DHS as an entity. So there's no reason for ICE to exist. There's never been any reason for ICE to exist in the first place. But in order to build it and to build it bigger, they need to have a boogeyman, and that boogeyman changes with the times. It started out, it was Muslim terrorists, and then, for a while there, when the liberals were in charge, it was the white nationalist January 6th, and now, it's the illegal immigrant. So big picture, yeah, this chaos is definitely by design, and I don't think anything makes that clearer than the fact that Minneapolis was the target for this operation. What is it? Metro Surge? Is that what they call it? I forget what the exact
I
title of
believe
it
so,
was.
yeah.
No, they picked Minneapolis because they know Tim Walz is kind of this ridiculous person, and he lost the presidential race to them, and so they think he's a good foil for them, because he's kind of a doofus, and so he is a convenient sort of political target. Minnesota is a place that actually has relatively strong social democratic programs where like immigrants can actually live with a modicum of stability in their lives and not be as starved for resources as a lot of immigrant communities are elsewhere in the country. And so, yeah, I mean, Minnesota was definitely chosen for all of these reasons. And they also knew, based on, 5 years ago, now 6 years ago almost, the George Floyd protests, that, it's a volatile city with a population that's not afraid to mix it up in the streets. So when you look at all that, it's almost impossible to think that these provocations are not deliberate.
Yeah. I also wonder if it has something to do too with the fact that a lot of as you talk about, there has to be an official enemy. Keenan, it almost seems in a way that the official enemy is actually shifting off of the immigrants and moving towards the American, liberal protesters, right? And
Sure.
Minneapolis is probably a good population to try to demonize those liberal protesters. I remember when I was on your show, there's a guy in a dog mask that's demonstrating in front of ICE. And to a lot of people in areas of this country, and not to dehumanize that person, you shouldn't get beat up for being,
Sure.
silly in front of an ICE officer. But when I see that, there is kind of like a, well, that person isn't representative of the rest of the country, as if this was going on in a city somewhere where it's a red state, at least, right? So you got a bunch of I think, like, primarily white liberals out there who get associated with Antifa. Some of them maybe are, maybe not, and then you could demonize them, and now you have a whole new enemy, right? It's not just the immigrants, it's all these liberals who are protesting the policy.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there is absolutely a targeting of the uh, dissenters themselves. I mean, that is certainly part of the whole strategy. And when you look at it, I mean, it looks like a civil war. I was going to say a soft civil war, but it doesn't look so soft. It's not so soft when people are getting killed out there. And most people don't want that. Which is why when you look at all of the numbers coming out now, there was you hate to sort of sterilize this by talking about poll numbers in the wake of such a thing, but you know Rasmussen, which is a pretty right wing leaning outlet, just showed Trump's favorability numbers on immigration are now 20 points underwater, 39% favorable to then 59% in opposition to these policies. So, most people don't want civil war. Most people don't want unrest. Most people want kind of still and quiet. Most people want to be able to live peacefully and sort of coexist with each other peacefully, which is why you see the numbers being what they are. And it's why you've seen today just pretty significant backtracking. At Carolyn Levitt's press conference, she refused to back up Kristi Noem and Stephen Miller, who came out right away and said that Alex Preddy was a domestic terrorist and an agitator. Like they did not affirm that. You saw Rand Paul now calling for the head of ICE and CBP to come and testify before the Senate. This really was, I think, a major tipping point for obvious reasons. Anybody who looks at that video and is not a biased actor can see that for what it was, which is just absolute murder.
Apparently, unless into the White House recently, Keaton, I do have just a roll. This is a montage of a bunch of Trump officials discussing the shooting.
Who goes to a protest and brings a gun? I mean, was he not asking for some kind of trouble in that situation?
But as Secretary Noem said, no one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines. That is not a peaceful protest.
And I don't know of any peaceful protester that shows up with a gun and ammunition rather than a sign.
I'm sorry that this gentleman is dead, but he did bring a 9mm semi-automatic weapon with 2 cartridges to what was supposed to be a peaceful protest.
Peaceful protesters don't have 9mm weapons.
He wasn't there to peacefully protest. He was there to perpetuate violence.
I mean, as you know, he was an ICU nurse, worked for the Veterans Administration, and there's no evidence that he brandished the gun whatsoever. In fact, it appears that he was disarmed before
he brought a gun. I've been to a protest. Yeah. Guess what? I didn't bring a gun. I brought a billboard.
You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want. It's that simple. You don't have that right.
Who goes to a protest and brings a gun? I mean,
that is just a really amazing set of reactions, right, Keaton? You know, if this was a right-winger who went to a protest under Joe Biden was killed, I could imagine a bunch of Democrats saying that, but this is a Republican administration. They're supposed to be pro-Second Amendment, and here they're essentially saying that going to a protest with a weapon, even if you never take it out or anything, they could kill you for that. I mean, were you astounded by the reaction?
Yeah. First of all, I want to know what protest Scott Besson ever went to. I want to know
with
that.
The billboard.
I would like. I have a question about that. I don't. I'm not saying it's not true, but I would have pressed him on what, because I don't even have a joke for that. Like, I wish I had a joke for what protest he would go to. I have to workshop that a little more. It's a tough one. Yeah, man. I mean, look, this part of it is especially absurd and especially hypocritical coming, out of the right, who, for decades have insisted that people have a right to conceal carry. I mean, that is state law. Simple as that. Look, I'm more on the left side of things. I'm not anti-Second Amendment. I'm not anti-gun ownership, but as a point of advice, I would agree that, when you bring a gun like that, when you bring a gun into a situation like that, the odds of you using it for self-defense are a lot smaller than the odds that something's going to go haywire and either that gun will be used against you or that a situation will escalate to the point where it turns violent in a way that it wouldn't have absent the presence of a gun. Now, obviously, this had turned violent before then. It turned deadly because they saw a gun and panicked, right? So I am not of the opinion that it's advisable to bring a gun into a situation like that. I felt the same way about Kyle Rittenhouse, who brought a gun to the BLM protest. I didn't think Kyle Rittenhouse was guilty as charged. I didn't think there was anywhere near enough evidence to convict him because there was no proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, not even close. But I said at the time, not a smart idea to bring a weapon like that to a protest. And guess who disagreed with that? Every single one of these people who are now saying this guy shouldn't have had a gun there. So it's laughable. It's laughable. I mean, these people are a joke. Kash Patel is a joke. Kristi Noem is a joke. Now, we are seeing, I mean, that those were mostly from yesterday's sort of Sunday morning shows, and obviously Kristi Noem's press conference. Today we are seeing not formal backtracking, but you saw Trump tweet out today, hey, I had a productive call with Tim Walz, and here are our terms for leaving the state. Like, I think they understand how damaging this is, and it's damaging to the overall. If you're playing the long game, and the long game is to build a police state, sometimes, when you hit the gas too hard, it becomes a one step forward, two steps back kind of thing because the backlash is just so swift. Now you have the Republican gubernatorial candidate dropped out of the race today, saying, I can't support what the Republican Party nationally is doing to our state here. And, he probably feared not getting the right endorsements from the national party that he would need to run a competitive race. Like I said, you saw Rand Paul now is demanding that the head of ICE come in and testify. Like, if your goal is to empower a national police force, there is such a thing as moving too fast, and I think they have realized that this is moving a bit too fast. It's not to give anybody a false sense of security that we're out of the woods, right? But I think for prudential reasons, they realize they need a change. That's why they're pulling out Greg Bovino and putting in Tom Homan.
That's interesting because in a sense, if Rand Paul is just demanding that somebody come in and testify to Congress, they just won't do it. I mean, we saw this with, the follow-on strike to the first, alleged drug boat strike, right? Where there's a bunch of people clinging to the wreckage of the vessel and then they blew them up. And, there's supposed to be congressional heads were going to roll. There was going to be all this reaction to it. And just a couple days ago, they blew up another drug boat and Nobody in Congress has anything to say about it. Congress hasn't moved on restraining Trump here. And I do wonder at this point, Keaton, if really the only limit on Donald Trump is, as Donald Trump would say himself,
Right.
he will go as absolute far as he wants. So, you say there the goal is to create a police state. You really think that's the direction the Trump administration wants to take us? And of course, then to what end?
Well, obviously, look, I mean, it's a very scary thing. But I think ultimately, I mean, if you want to look really big picture when you talk about to what end, you look at Davos, you had Elon Musk there sitting up on the stage saying that within our lifetime there will be more robots on Earth than people. This is the world that they envision. They envision a depopulated world where wealth is concentrated amongst the very, very few at the very, very top of the economic ladder. And then you have an immiserated global peasant underclass. And the reason you need a police state for that is to suppress dissent when people realize that there's nothing in it for them in this future world that the oligarchs have built. I mean, that's really big picture. If you talk about sort of the ideological drive behind this, moment to moment, honestly, I don't think Donald Trump is a big enough thinker to really grasp that. I think Donald Trump, thinks that immigrants make the country dirty, and we have to get them out to make America great. And he's just being led around by ideologues like Miller, who is just completely sabotaging his presidency and his legacy from that perspective in a short term sense. I mean, this administration has really just been sort of cannibalized
Mhm.
by these architects of a very dismal and dark future. And that began to be apparent after October 7th when we all realized the extent to which the Israelis had their hooks in Trump. And then it became doubly apparent, I think, after Butler, which is when Elon Musk really went all in for Trump. I mean, between the Israelis and the tech oligarchs, you're talking about dystopian shit, like real dystopian shit. And now they have power. They have power. And so, big picture, I do think that's where this is all headed. Now, the day to day requires a little bit more finesse than that. And I think that's why you're seeing them make these moves in Minnesota, because ultimately you need consent of the people to get to the next step. And they had consent of the people. They had this country right where they wanted them. Immigration was their top issue. They were able to convince a vast majority of people in this country that these deportations were necessary. And now they've completely blown it because they went too mask off too soon. And so what their next step is, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it is really crazy, Keaton, that you had Trump elected, in two of his big issues, or I guess three of his big issues, fixing the economy, immigration, and staying out of foreign entanglements. He allows Israel to run his Middle East policy, and so we're more embroiled there than ever. He allows Marco Rubio to run his Latin American policy, so now we're getting kidnapping the president of foreign countries, and
Mhm.
then Stephen Miller directing his immigration policy, and where all this Donald Trump really had to do is shut down the border and then deport anyone who ended up in the criminal justice system, right? So somebody
Right.
gets arrested, they beat their wife, drunk driving, then you have your immigration guys
Well, now
go
they need
in.
those people to join ICE, actually. Yeah.
Right. And now, and you deport those people, and the American people are very happy with that policy. And I think it's actually very easy to execute something like that. The shutting down the border obviously was, they did it in a
Sure.
couple months.
Right.
But now they've lost the entire the part of the Trump base who consciously made a decision to support him, didn't just do it reflexively, so have now all left him. All he has left are the Trump stands, which means in what, 8 months from now, the Republicans are set up to be absolutely clobbered in the midterms. Do you? I know you're kind of more on the left wing of things, so do you see any kind of meaningful resistance from Democrats on the horizon here? Are they going to do anything to rein in Donald Trump on foreign policy or domestic policy?
Well, on foreign policy, absolutely not. um, on domestic policy, when it comes to the ICE stuff, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, they'll come out and say that ICE can murder people, but they can't wear a mask, or they have to wear a body cam. And so, if you're going to kill people, you need a warrant first. I mean, that's kind of what I expect from the Democrats. Look, they have a chance right now to exercise some leverage. I've been through too many of these things now to have any faith at all that they will not cave. So I have absolutely zero confidence in them as a party. But now you look at this shutdown fight that is now imminent. The Democrats, to be clear, cannot in the short term impede any of this ICE stuff, since ICE already got their money from the one big beautiful bill. But what they can do is they can sort of use the rest of the system as leverage against ICE. In other words, you could say, look, we're not funding the rest of DHS unless certain reforms are made at ICE, and that won't have any impact in the short term. But the more they hold out, the more it potentially could. Will they? Who knows? Who knows? But this is a situation where it really is now or never for them. I mean, they have the power, if they exercise it, to make pretty big demands, such as the firing of Kristi Noem. They could just say, look, we're not passing a funding bill unless this is done, unless X, Y, and Z are done. And like I said, those changes will not make themselves immediately apparent, since ICE already has enough funding that it needs to operate however many months into the future. I guess that depends on the expansiveness of the operation. But no, they have some cards to play now. They, just like they had cards to play in 2009 when they supposedly tried to get a good healthcare plan passed, and we ended up with what we have now, which is the ACA, which is obviously just tremendously inadequate. They had a chance during the Build Back Better fight in 2021. They caved then. They had a chance back in March of last year, which was the first time that Schumer caved and the base of the party revolted. They had a chance in November where they held out just long enough to win those statewide elections, and then they caved. So, I'm past the point where I can give anybody any hope in the Democratic Party, but I do think it's important to note that they do have some power here, because if you get so black-pilled to the point where you think everything's hopeless, in a way that kind of exonerates the Democrats and lets them off the hook in a way, because if you get so if you get so doomerish that you think, well, there's nothing they could have done anyway, then you don't really hold them responsible for their failing. So we will see. I mean, now you have a lot of senators saying they're not voting for this DHS funding. That makes itself a big problem in a week when the funding deadline passes, and then you have an ongoing showdown. We just have to wait and see. I mean, if past is prologue, they will disappoint. The only caveat to that is that I think it's getting pretty clear that these are existential stakes at this point. Like, if you don't do everything you can to slow this down as much as you can, then there's really no reason for you to exist as a party at all. I think they know that the base understands that.
I hope you're right that they do have that understanding and will maybe do something here. I've every time the Democrats or Republicans are the opposition party, it's just always so disappointing. Keaton, we seem to, under President Donald Trump, be living in a time of just emergency after emergency, crisis after crisis. We're bombing Iran in June, we're bombing Yemen in March. We're kidnapping Maduro. We got this massive military buildup in the Caribbean. Of course, the Epstein files are in the background of all of this, which makes you wonder if that's a part of it. But, it seems like the next crisis is going to be Iran, that Donald Trump has now moved an aircraft carrier strike group into the Middle East, along with additional warplanes and advanced air defense systems. So, Keaton, I see I have this tweet from Mark Levin here. He's so excited. He's calling for, he says, get Khomeini. Are we ready now? So what do you think, Keaton? Is Iran are we going back to war with Iran?
Well, I said after the 12-day war in June of last year that anybody breathing a sigh of relief as if we had dodged a bullet for good was insane. It was obvious that Israel was going to agitate for war. I said by the end of 2025, which they did literally right under the wire, Netanyahu meets in D.C. with Trump and lobbies for regime change there. That's obviously what these quote unquote protests are all about, where you have the Mossad admitting that they are on the grounds there. And so, yeah, look, that is the Israelis' goal. And, you know, when when the Israelis say jump, Trump says how high. And so, yeah, I think that is where the momentum is, of course. I think there's going to be a full court press for regime change in Iran. I think the hope now is that these protests will take it as far as they can to limit, outside involvement in terms of strikes or boots on the ground. But yeah, I think that's absolutely their goal.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about this and have been really warning about it for the past couple of weeks that I think we are on the brink of another war with Iran. And um, who knows what this one looks like if they're able to de-escalate it or not as they did the first one. But Keaton, thank you so much for coming back on the show today. I really appreciate your time, and of course for having me on Due Dissidents a little bit ago. Everybody be sure to check out Due Dissidents. I definitely recommend that show. I am a regular listener, so I know they are producing a quality and worthwhile product that you're really going to like, Keaton and Russ over there. And of course, subscribe, share, comment on this show. It really helps us out. Give us a thumbs up. And if you're over on that, it's a repost. And we will be back with more shows later in the week. Thanks, Keaton.
Thanks, man. Great to see you again.